Welcome in, everybody, to the Flagship Podcast. We are live on the Horns 24/7 YouTube channel. I am Chip Brown of Horns247.com, joined, as always, by the managing editor of Horns 24/7, Taylor Estes. Taylor, we've got a lot to talk about.
We do.
We got, players announcing they're staying. We got coaches on the move. We've got a basketball team in transition, and we have opened up the floor for this edition of the Flagship Podcast to a mailbag format. We've been taking questions on the Flagship message board. For those of you who wonder where the Flagship comes from, when we talk about the Flagship Podcast, it's because our message board at Horns 24/7 is called the Flagship. So who better to involve in the Flagship Podcast mailbag than the Flagship members?
Yeah, exactly. Who was the genius that had the idea to name the podcast after the message board so we can do double branding?
Oh, was that you?
Oh, yeah, I think it was actually.
Oh, nice. Good
Yeah,
job. Hey, don't break your arm patting yourself on the back there.
sorry. Oh, yeah. No, but yes, we did open up, our to get our members questions so we can take them. And also, we will also be taking questions from our Facebook page and from the YouTube channel as they roll in as we do this live show too. So send us your questions in there, and we will try to get to everyone that we can. But I don't think we need to waste too much time, introing this. Chip, you ready to answer some questions here?
I'm ready.
All right. So, obviously, big breaking news that happened at the end of last week with Texas announcing the firing of Chris Beard for cause after he was charged with felony assault of a family member. And with that said, Chip, I'm going to lead with the first question. I'm going to throw it to you here. Any insights on who may be replacing Chris Beard from Texas Warrior?
Well, it's interesting because there's already been reports that John Calipari, the coach at Kentucky, that Texas has put out feelers about possibly bringing in John Calipari from Kentucky. That would be fascinating, and I'm gonna wait to really expound on that until I've had a little more time to dig in. It's been kind of a crazy weekend, obviously,
Yeah.
with Texas learning last Thursday that Chris Beard is done, and then Texas went up to Stillwater and really played a fantastic basketball game, much improved defensive effort in a 56-46 win over Oklahoma State, who played well in that game, had a huge game from Khalid Boone, who almost had a triple-double. He had so many blocks in addition to a double-double in scoring and rebounding. And Texas, once again, had to make plays down the stretch to pull that game out, and it was really impressive. And so we had a chance to talk to the players and Rodney Terry today. We're recording, obviously, here on Monday, and this is a veteran team. They know what they're up against. They have a pretty good handle on trying to control what they can control. And Rodney Terry said, listen, I am all about being in the moment. You know, people are asking him now, you feel like the pressure's on, you're trying to win the job, or you could end up being replaced. And he said, listen, man, I'm just focused in on what we've got to get done with these players heading into a game Wednesday night against TCU, a ranked TCU team coming to the Moody Center. Oddly enough, Texas is 2-0 in Big 12 road games and 0-1 at home after losing that game last week, 116-103 to Kansas State. So I think just like the Texas trio, I'll call them, Chris Del Conte, Jay Hartzell, Kevin Eltife, they will do their due diligence. They were talking to Urban Meyer as a consultant in replacing Tom Herman and as a candidate,
Right.
Taylor. And obviously, Urban Meyer opted for the NFL. That was a disaster. Texas went with Steve Sarkisian. So, look, the biggest names in college basketball are going to be uh, on the hot board, and you can find that hot board over at Horns 24/7. Um, I think Eric Musselman at Arkansas is a guy I think uh, Texas officials looked at they when Shaka Smart was let go and Chris Beard was ultimately hired. So I think those are a couple names right now that can nosh on and snack on, but Texas officials are going to be respectful of Rodney Terry. They're going to do their homework, but there's not going to be um, anything done or finalized anytime in the immediate future, because they want to give Rodney Terry and this team they want to respect their attempt to go as far as they can go this season.
Right. Yeah, they've already had enough distractions, right, from things that are outside of their control with what happened with Chris Beard. I'm glad that you mentioned Eric Musselman, because I was gonna ask. That was a name that they kind of were looking in the last go around. It wasn't too long ago, Chip. I mean, if we think about it, Chris Beard was what, a year and a half on
22
the
months
job.
ago,
Yeah.
21
So
months ago.
yeah, so they've kind of done some due diligence, I think, but that's good to know, that they're going to take their time and do this. Speaking of another coach that is expected to be leaving, actually, is Brennan Marion, the Texas wide receivers coach. We reported on Sunday that after Bruce Feldman first was to report it, but that he was going to be hired at UNLV as the offensive coordinator on Barry Odom's staff. After Bobby Petrino had taken the job, was there for less than a month, and then was hired at Texas A&M. So obviously, that's the question we got here, and the question here is from Mikey Gress 6. Who are the realistic candidates you are hearing to replace Brennan Marion? Chip, I'll just kind of start off here. I think it's a little bit too. It's so quick that this has happened. This has been a very quick turnaround. That I would say it would be a little unfair for us to say realistic candidates right now. There's definitely guys that we would probably think that Steve Sarkisian should consider. So I'm going to kind of alter this question a little bit and say, what do you think Texas needs to find in a receivers coach when they're looking for these candidates?
Well, I think that Steve Sarkisian um, needs to make sure that he's got a coach who can handle strong personalities,
Yeah.
because Steve Sarkisian is going to recruit the best of the best. He's that was one of the reasons that he kind of parted ways with Andre Coleman. Andre Coleman kind of liked to find those chip on the shoulder guys, the Tyler Lockett's of the world, whereas Steve Sarkisian wants to go find the next, um, Jerry Jeudy, Devontae Smith, Jalen Waddle, and he found one in Xavier Worthy. Worthy's obviously a personality that the incoming coach is going to need to be able to, um, command, inspire, nurture, coach hard, and there was no question that Brennan Marion was looking to become an offensive coordinator. Heck, I wrote a story in June after talking to Brennan Marion and a number of coaches that he's worked for, including, um, you know, um, Gus Malzahn and others. And Brennan Marion's a guy who's been an offensive coordinator at a lower level, and so was he uh, overly ambitious? I don't know, but uh, I do know that you've got to bring in a coach who can develop excellent young talent. You're bringing in Jonte Cook, you're bringing in DeAndre Moore, you're bringing in Ryan Niblett. you've got Jordan Whittington right now saying, I'm coming back. Although he announced he was coming back before Brennan Marion got linked to the UNLV job, Taylor. And one of
Right.
our sources had said, as long as Marion is here, Whittington will be here. So,
Yeah.
who knows? And, everyone's still wondering if Xavier Worthy is in or is he out. I think he's in, but, it's an important hire because honestly, Taylor, the receivers position was a little bit of a letdown this year. It didn't take that big next step. Now, obviously, the injury to Isaiah Nair was a big deal. He was a 12 touchdown receiver at Wyoming. He tears his ACL before the 2022 season. We'll see him hopefully in 2023 this fall. But the receiver position fell off a little bit from last year. And so part of that is a young quarterback. We know that
Right.
when yours learning on the job, freshman, and he should be better. That whole room should be better. Heck, you got Arch Manning on campus already getting ready to go through winter workouts and spring football. So, yeah, it's an important position. Usually that's a big time recruiting position for you. And Brennan Marion did an excellent job in the recruiting game.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna follow up with. I mean, a lot of times receivers and cornerbacks coaches, a lot of times they are good at developing talent, but really where they kind of find their prowess is on the recruiting trail. And Brendan Marion signed 3 top 100 prospects in the 2023 class, according to the 24/7 Sports Composite. Texas, I believe, had a total of 8. So 3 of 8 he was the primary recruiter for. And as you mentioned, it was Jonte Cook, Ryan Niblett, and DeAndre Moore. So definitely, he was a really good recruiter. And when, you talk about Brandon Marion, I think ultimately his goal is to be a head coach. And so that I feel like that's kind of always what he's wanted to do. He was in the mix for the Tulsa head coaching job soon after the regular season ended. He didn't end up getting that, but he also went to Tulsa too as a player. So there's I think you can say it's overly ambitious as all you want, but I mean, everybody should be ambitious in their
Yeah.
career, right? I mean, I don't want to just always stay stagnant, I think that's how it goes. And it will be interesting to watch Xavier Worthy and Jordan Whittington, because as Chip mentioned, we did have sources say that Jordan Whittington really wanted to play for Brendan Marion again. So we'll see if that changes. I would hope not at this point, since he already made his announcement, his official announcement that he was returning. Xavier Worthy is still kind of a TBD type of guy, but he was one that has since congratulated Brendan Marion after the report surfaced. UNLV has not officially announced the hire, but yeah, this is definitely going to be one to watch. One name that I feel like has kind of come into the mix that people I think probably want to see is marginal hooks. Excuse me. The where is he? I'm trying to remember exactly where he's at, but that was a name that our Mike Roach had said something about, that he could be a guy to keep an eye on. Another one, also Emmett Jones, the wide receivers coach at Texas Tech. I feel like every time there's been a receiver coach opening at Texas, his name somehow gets thrown into the mix. I think one that Texas fans were probably hoping to find was Rashad Samples, who used to be a recruiting, director at Texas, ended up going to the LA or he went to SMU first, then was hired by the Rams, and now he just was hired at Arizona State. Not sure what his contract's like, but I'd be a little surprised if he enters the mix just because he just was hired at Arizona State. I believe it's receivers coach too.
Well, and think about how this whole domino started with Bobby Petrino, who takes the
Yeah.
UNLV offensive coordinator position under Barry Odom, as you mentioned. And 3 weeks later, he's out of there and headed
Right.
to Texas A&M to join Jimbo Fisher's staff. That creates the opening that Odom ultimately gives to Brennan Marion. And I give credit to Brennan Marion. I mean, he's willing to bet on himself. UNLV is a program that has, been lost for quite some time. I mean, really since John Robinson was there, more than a decade ago. And so let's see if, Brennan Marion has his go-go offense. It's unconventional. It's all about creating mismatches in the running game and overloading, one side to force the defense to make a commitment, and then trying to get the ball into playmakers' hands in space away from the strong side. And we've seen coaches like Lincoln Riley, Cliff Kingsbury, even Steve Sarkisian use some of that go-go offense that Brennan Marion has championed. And so it's a great opportunity for Brennan Marion to bet on himself. And Barry Odom's a defensive-minded coach, did a great job at Arkansas, and now we'll see what those two can do at UNLV. And that's the other reason why it's such a good opportunity for Brennan Marion. With Barry Odom being, the defensive-minded guy, he's going to give Brennan Marion the keys to run that offense, and that's exciting because he's under an offensive-minded head coach at Texas. Now he gets to get out there and shine, and I really like Brennan Marion, and he's a fantastic story. I mean, the guy was like living in the locker room at
His junior college.
at the junior college, yeah, where he first started coaching. I mean, and he goes to Tulsa, plays for Gus Malzahn and at Tulsa, and Mike Norvell, who's now the head coach at Florida State, who is the offensive coordinator. So they all just rave about Brennan Marion. So kudos to him.
Yeah, for sure. And it's kind of funny, kind of coming full circle. Barry Odom was also in the mix for the Tulsa head coaching job. So both of them interviewed for the Tulsa job as a head coach candidate. Barry Odom ultimately gets hired at UNLV and then hires Brennan Marion. So, yeah, it's a great opportunity. I think you said it best. He's under a coach that's going to kind of give him the keys to the offense, and it provides him an opportunity to really shine as an offensive coordinator, play caller, offensive mind, that go-go offense, as you mentioned, something that, I think a lot of Texas fans were hoping to see more of, I would say sometimes this year. But yeah, I mean, this is it's a good, career move, I would say, for Brennan Marion, especially under a new coaching staff where you're not in a position to where it's like, you need to win this year or else you're going to be fired or something like that. So,
Yeah.
um, and on those lines, Chip, my next question here is from, I apologize if I am mispronouncing what this username is, but Ramo Sock 88. Are there any other assistant coaches you all have heard that are interviewing for other jobs? And are these coaches at a serious risk of leaving?
I don't think anything has, I did, this isn't an assistant coach, but I did talk to Gary Patterson yesterday. He's in LA for the TCU Georgia national championship game. I wrote about it in the Morning Brew this morning, my daily column during the week. And, I said, "Are you coming back to Texas?" And he said, "I might." He said, I took that special assistant role in January of last year, right after the season, didn't really take time for myself. He said, "I'm kind of doing that now with my wife, Kelsey, who is a UT grad." And so, that one might be, one to keep an eye on. And I don't know that Gary Patterson has something else lined up, but I think he's trying to figure it out. He's trying to figure it out what he wants his next step to be. And he was very complimentary of Steve Sarkisian. Said, "I've probably learned more than I've given in this past year in terms of recruiting and offensively. What Steve Sarkisian, how he likes to formulate his offensive game plan, and then just how." Seeing how another team practices and all of that, and seeing how a program like Texas that has the best of the best in terms of the uh, training staff, nutritionists, everything, I think that's what Gary Patterson was talking about. So, um, that's one to keep an eye on. But it sounds to me like this staff is hungry and excited about the young talent that it's bringing in, and they really want to develop it and see where this program can go in the next, starting next year, starting this fall. We're in 2023 now.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and honestly, I would say it would be the best case scenario for Texas to not lose any other assistant coaches, because the one consistent thing that Texas has had in the football department has been change, over the last 10 years. And um, you saw improvement this year. Maybe some fans feel like it wasn't enough improvement, but you saw improvement substantially. And I think that you'll continue to see that, especially as these coaches not only, get to know the players and get to know their roster and their personnel, but also work with each other. I mean, that was one of the biggest things on defense, I think, in Steve Sarkisian's first year. Was Pete Kwiatkowski was one of the last coaches hired. And usually when a coordinator is hired, they get input on who the position coaches that they work with, that are hired too. And so he did not. The only coach that he had really any say of joining the staff was Jeff Choate, as co-defense coordinator, inside linebackers coach. But I think the more consistency you have in a coaching staff, the better off it is. It's a very uh, kind of foreign concept, I would say, Chip, in today's version of college football, as opposed to back when Mac Brown was able to kind of keep, in the early 2000s, his staff intact as much as possible. But it's I think that's a good thing for Texas. And yeah, I have not heard of any other assistant, like on-field assistant coaches being in the mix. There was another question about Gary Patterson, but I may go to that one actually now, just so you can kind of finish it up here. But is Gary Patterson expected to stay on another year? Do you think he even wants another head coaching role, or is he content being in a lower stress advisor role?
Yeah, I think and I wrote about this when I talked to him in June. He released his song,
Yeah.
"The Day I Walk Away." It was kind of a bit of a ode to his time at TCU, and he did not have a farewell press conference when he was let go at TCU during the season last year, and I think it is important to him to get into the College Football Hall of Fame, and he has all the criteria. He's won enough games. He's got the winning percentage, but he does have to be out of coaching for 3 years. I think the bigger question is he's got grandkids, and does he want to take a year, be a grandfather, um, and see what that life is like. Maybe that's something his wife Kelsey would love, and
Probably, yeah.
and then decide if he wants to get back in to the head coaching game. But I think he really, and obviously Chris Del Conte was a bit of a matchmaker with Steve Sarkisian and Gary Patterson, and I think Steve or Chris Del Conte wanted to make sure Gary had a landing spot. If he was still hungry for being around ball, being around college football, then hey, come do it at Texas, because
Mhm.
we can sure use your expertise. Gary Patterson did an unbelievable job of scouting opponents this year. We saw how well Texas played TCU defensively. Georgia would love to have that kind of game against TCU tonight, hold them to 17 points. But Patterson did a great job with that, and you heard Pete Kwiatkowski at the Alamo Bowl say he helped us with our match quarters pass defense, because we were moving to the match quarters, and there's no better person to bring in to consult about match quarters pass defense, because that's what Gary Patterson specialized in for 20 years at TCU. So I think it was a great, if it was a 1 year marriage, it was a great marriage on both sides. So we'll see. I like Gary Patterson told me, he said I might. So It's not a no, but I think, and it's interesting, and I give him credit for being able to go out to LA for this national championship game. He said, Kelsey and I talked about it. A lot of those players we recruited, we knew them, while they were in high school. We have strong bonds with those players. We want to go support them. We're not looking to be a distraction, but we feel like it's the right thing to do. So they'll be in SoFi Stadium for that national championship game tonight.
Yeah, and I think they have every right to do that. I don't think it's for a distraction in any way, shape, or form. I mean, Gary Patterson spent pretty much the entirety of his coaching career at TCU, whether it was as an assistant or as a head coach. He obviously, I think, definitely should be in the, at least in the talks for a college football Hall of Fame type of nomination or whatever. I'm not sure exactly what the word is, but yeah, like he should be in the mix for that too because of what he was able to do. I mean, without Gary Patterson, I doubt TCU's in the Big 12 right now. I mean,
Totally agree.
that's yeah. So he transformed that program. He made it a household name, a household brand. They're playing for the national championship tonight against Georgia, against all odds. Honestly, I mean, talk about a dark horse coming through and just kind of running. Actually, not kind of actually running the table. In the Big 12 this year, but yeah, I mean, this is. I think it was definitely a good union for all parties involved, and it also helped that TCU, from what we were hearing, paid him a cash buyout and one lump sum, right? Wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, which is a rarity. A lot of times, when you let go of a coach, there's word and verbiage and contracts that they'll say like an offset agreement where you need to actively be seeking employment elsewhere, and if you get another job, your buyout is lessened by whatever the other job is paying you. So Texas fans are very probably knowledgeable about buyouts considering how many that Texas has had lately. But all right, Chip, I'm going to go on over to another question here. This is actually, it's also from Ramos Sock. Hey, Ramos Sock 88, you asked some good questions that we picked two of yours now. But besides Xavier Worthy, are there any names you all have heard think about the transfer portal?
Not, not not so much. We'd heard that maybe Jordan Whittington was looking at the transfer portal before he announced he was coming back to Texas. Um, but for the most part, and that's not to say that things, can change after spring football, or they can change depending on what kind of NIL money gets, put in front of different players. But as of right now, um, I think it's quiet. Now, obviously, Texas is looking in the portal. We know that
Hmm.
Jalen Catalan from Arkansas, who I think is dynamite, and I know he's had some injury problems, but um, we've talked on the Flagship podcast that safety, a veteran safety, a veteran offensive lineman, um, possibly a veteran receiver, might be targets in the transfer portal for Texas. We heard Sark say he could take 2 to 5 more, um, you know, up to 5, I guess, in the portal. And and there's no rush on that. There's waves
Yeah.
of recruiting the portal. There's the wave right now that Jalen Catalan's in, and then there's the wave after spring football. So um, yeah, I think right now it's quiet, but it can change in a heartbeat.
Yeah, and that's the weird thing with the portal is, as Chip said, like there's the waves of it. There's once it opened in the end of the regular season back in 2022, it was like a flood, and all you were hearing was so and so enters the portal, so and so enters the portal, and it was like multiple per day. It seemed like at big programs even, and now it's kind of in the lull. But when you are hearing the guys that are in the portal now, it's moving fast, like the Jalen Catalans. I think he visited 3 schools, I think, this past week, including Texas. He had his visit to Texas on Sunday. If you want the latest on that, Mike Roach kind of wrote it up in the Stampede this morning. Definitely go over and get all the details there. But it sounds like it's between Purdue, Texas, Texas A&M, but you never know. There could be another program that enters the mix. I see this probably going pretty quickly, but the next wave is going to be the one to watch is going to be after spring football. And Steve Sarkisian's been very open with the players that he has on his roster, the ones that if he feels that maybe it's best for them to move on, he'll have those conversations. He has them after the regular season and he has them after spring ball. And so that will be something to continue to monitor as the Longhorns go through the offseason here. But yeah, there's been no other names in the portal. I will say one thing that has been, kind of a question of is he coming or staying or is he going is Jalen Ford, not for the portal, more for the NFL draft. I've been hearing there hasn't been a definitive decision made, but right now he's potentially leaning towards returning. Which and then when we talked to him after the season, it kind of he was even the way he was answering questions about next year, it seemed like that was where it was going. The college advisory committee grades were submitted to Texas and other schools at the beginning of last week, I believe it was. So they're starting to kind of get those grades coming in, make the decisions. That's going to be something you'll monitor in the coming days because I think it's what is it, January 16th that is the deadline. I think that they have to declare for underclassmanship.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah, I think it is. So, there's about a week left of that. That's going to be something to monitor. And that's why you want to be over at Horns 24/7 because we will keep you updated on all attrition, whether it's transfer portal, whether it's additions, whether it's subtractions, or whether it's players going to the NFL draft or returning. So, next one here, we'll look ahead to the future now. Who's the biggest breakout star for next year from JNMWTX? I'll let you go first.
Well, it needs to be the quarterback position, in my opinion, because obviously it was a learning on the job experience for Quinn Ewers. Um, this in the 2022 season, and um, you you just need to see that quarterback position take the next step and be. I've talked about this a lot, but we need to see Quinn Ewers lead his team from behind late in a game. That's the signature of any top quarterback, that ability to perform under pressure and get it done, bring your team back in a tight ball game. And and so, I obviously I'm looking at the running back position, Taylor, and I'm going, okay, is it Cedric Baxter? And obviously, Taylor reported first about Jonathan Brooks having the hernia surgery after the Alamo Bowl, which might have contributed to his lack of touches in that game. But that's going to be fascinating too, because obviously, when you say goodbye to Bijan Robinson and Roshan Johnson, you want to have an answer. And I'm not trying to put this on Cedric Baxter. I said this last week. Watching his film, he looks like a young Adrian Peterson. The way he runs upright. They were both 6'1", 220 coming out of high school. And Cedric Baxter is a fun guy to watch on film. I mean, he gets going north and south, and he can move. We got to see if he can catch the football. I don't know if anyone can catch the football like Bijan Robinson,
Yeah.
but that's going to be obviously a huge position to look for. And then, on the defensive side, I know I'm going on and on here, but on the defensive side, Anthony Hill at linebacker. Let's see how quickly he can, digest this defense, how quickly he can process, because he is going to be an impact player, whether it's as a true freshman or after that. But I think this kid is a player.
Yeah, and I would agree with you about I think Quinn Ewers needs to be the breakout star, especially with the departures of both Roshan Johnson and Bijan Robinson. I mean, that doesn't just leave a hole; it leaves like a crater on the roster, honestly. And as Chip mentioned, yeah, I did report last week. Jonathan Brooks did have hernia surgery. I believe it was the day after the Alamo Bowl, actually. So very, very soon after that game. Would not surprise me if that was why Sark and the staff decided to go with a little bit more of a pass heavy attack. against Washington. Sark did say that was a plan all along. From what I was told, Jonathan Brooks had been playing through the hernia, or had the hernia issue pretty much all year. He continued to play through it. And he didn't want to get surgery mid-season. He really wanted to finish the year and then, go through the surgery and rehab process. So from everything I'm hearing, surgery went well. He's recovering well. He's supposed to be on campus this week with school starting. So it's he'll be going through the rehab process now next. But I would say he's also a guy to watch though too. I think, with him, I mean, go back to the Kansas game. It's hard to kind of erase the memories that he left in that game. I mean, that was a really solid performance for a guy that hadn't really had very much very many carries at all, honestly. And so he's a guy I think that, assuming that all of the surgery, healing, everything goes well, I think he could be a guy to watch. And we haven't really seen Jaden Blue either. That's another guy that, you kind of don't want to forget about. I think there's been was there I feel it's so hard to keep up with like the transfer portal stuff. There was no reports about him in the transfer portal, right?
There were
There's
rumblings, and then he came
rumblings,
out and said, I'm back."
right, yeah. But he's a guy definitely to watch too. And so I don't necessarily think that Cedric Baxter needs to have it put on him because I think the running back room is very talented. We just haven't seen a lot of the talent yet. But I would say those two to watch. And then Jalen Gilbo, I think, is a guy on defense to keep an eye on. I mean, he had an injury mid-season that kept him out the rest of the year. But if he can stay focused, stay in the program, not let off-field issues, come in or anything like that, I think he could be a guy that could be a breakout star next year.
Yeah, and Barron Sorrell needs to keep coming because
Yeah.
he got off to the great start. I think he finished up with 5.5 sacks. He needs to be a 10-sack guy next year because he's got the length, he's got the want to, he's got the physical tools. He's just got to sharpen everything up and
Yeah.
be a guy who can beat tackles and off, just use an array of moves, whether it's the long arm or speed to power or the chop, whatever it takes, rip for him to get to the quarterback. He's got to add all those tools to his repertoire, and obviously there's a ton of young talent that we'll enjoy watching develop from that 2022 recruiting class and now from this top 3 2023 recruiting class.
Yeah, and Byron Murphy. I mean, I think Byron Murphy might be my favorite player on the team just from I just want him to get the opportunity to be the main guy. I mean, he's been behind some very, big veteran players that have played a lot of games at Texas. He now will have probably more of an opportunity to secure plenty more reps. And I think he's a guy also to watch there at the defensive line there.
Yeah, and he's a guy who's been identified by teammates as a leader,
Hmm.
as a guy who will emerge. You lose Keandre Coburn, you lose Moro Ajomo. Those guys have been big voices in that defensive tackle room. Byron Murphy's a guy. Tavondre Sweat was pointed out by Steve Sarkisian. That's important. You got to have guys up front in the offensive line room, in the defensive line room, who are respected, feared. Casey Hampton always told me it helps when your best players on the offensive and defensive lines also have a nastiness to them that causes the whole locker room to like sit up straight when
Yeah, shudder
those
a little
guys
bit.
talk.
Yeah.
So
Good stuff there. All right, next one here. Chip, I'll let you handle this one. What's the latest on the indoor practice facility from Riz Lewis? Sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. Riz Lewis.
yeah, I've been reporting in the Insider for a year that it's coming, and now I think we're real close to an announcement. I'm everything I'm hearing is that the indoor practice facility will be just south of DKR. It will not be at the Denius Fields. They're gonna clear some space and
Pop the bubble. Just
yeah,
kidding.
pop the bubble. And it's interesting, the geography of the land right between the rec center and the Jamale Swim Center. It's on a slope. So you could have the majority of the indoor facility underground. Um, typically those are 55 feet high facilities. Well, if you can sink it, then it doesn't become this obnoxious structure on your campus. It can be more subtle. But I think we're going to get an announcement here this month, by the end of the month. Let's put it that way. And I think it's going to be a really cool project, and it's sort of the last big priority for Chris Del Conte, who has led this unbelievable um, charge of facility renovation. We're talking $750 million. This would take it over $800 million in facility upgrades, and this is really the last big priority on that list. So um, it's exciting times for Texas football. Now, I think it'll take over a year for this to become a reality, because you do have to you have to move basically the School of Social Work elsewhere on campus, and then you have to raise that building and go deep underground. So it could be a year and a half project. So we'll say 2 years, maybe ready for the 24 season. But yeah, I think an announcement, we'll say by the end of the month, by the end of January.
Okay, that's good to know. And speaking of the 24 season, I'm going to throw you another one again here too. Any update on the impending move to the SEC, buyout updates, rumors, etc. from SOTX Horn 90?
Yeah, I'm still of the belief, and I've been led to believe in talking to sources who are involved, that it will be 2024. Now, there's some interesting dynamics to all this. ESPN is heavily involved. I've said ESPN has the means and the incentive for Texas to be, and OU to be, in the SEC in the fall of 2024, when ESPN takes over the broadcast rights for football in the SEC. It is interesting because ESPN has contracts with both the Big 12 and the SEC going forward. We know the Big 12 just got their new media rights deal. It will involve ESPN and Fox again going forward. And Pac-12 still does not have a new media rights deal, by the way. But you look at this, and ESPN might want some things from Texas and OU, like playing games against Big 12 teams to sort of help their Big 12 side of the media rights, to bolster that deal for maybe 4 years. And then the question becomes, okay, well, who would Texas and OU play if that was the case? So stay tuned on that, by the way. And I still think it will be 24. I know everything they say is, oh, we're honoring our deal, and they, there's a possibility that it could end up where Texas honors the the current agreement with the Big 12, and they leave and go to the SEC in 2025. To me, the only way that happens is if OU balks and decides we don't have the money for this, or if ESPN doesn't cover their expenses, because Texas and OU are going to move together. And so that I think it's fair to say Texas has the means. And again, it's because they have the Longhorn Network contract, which they will still be owed $150 million after the 23 football season from ESPN for the remainder of that Longhorn Network contract. That's money that can be used to cover both Texas and OU's move to the SEC. And so we'll see. No one's going to admit to any of this. They're all going to deny it and say blah blah blah. ESPN's not going to say a word because Bob Bowlesby basically accused them of tampering and destabilizing the Big 12. And when Texas and OU announced a year ago, or the summer of 21, that they were headed to the SEC. So everyone's going to tiptoe along the dotted line here until we get some announcement. But Taylor, I do think it's possible that if they can reach some kind of agreement, Texas, OU, whether it's playing teams from the Big 12 for another couple teams for another 4 years, that a deal could be announced before sooner rather than later. I'll just put it that way. But as of right now, I still think that Texas and OU will be in the SEC in the fall of 2024.
All right. There's some good stuff there. But I'm going to take a question here from the Facebook page, actually, from Brian Judson. Is Christian Jones coming back or declaring for the draft?
That it's funny because I was just trying to reach out to Christian. There's been a lot of talk about him coming back for a 6th year.
Yeah.
Which I was a little surprised by because it sounded like when we were talking to Kyle Flood that Cam Williams might be ready to go at right tackle as a 2nd-year offensive lineman. But look, that's up to Christian Jones. I mean, if he wants to come back, compete, if he feels like he's that much better than Cam Williams or some of these other developing offensive linemen who came in that star-studded 22 class. You got 5 offensive linemen coming in this 23 class. 4 of them are early enrollees. That would be a little surprising, but I got to give it to Christian Jones because he did get better. He was much better actually at right tackle than he was at left tackle. And that's big kudos to Christian Jones because he was according to Pro Football Focus grades, he was the worst offensive lineman on the field in 2021. And he was markedly better on the right side in 2022. So, I got to get Christian to hit me back on that.
Yeah. And that's a huge credit also to Kyle Flood for acknowledging that, maybe we shift him to the other side and he'll do better because, yeah, you're right. He was night and day better. It also is a credit to Kelvin Banks being ready to take on, that left tackle role on the offensive line as a non-early enrollee last year. I mean, that was for him to come on the way he did was so surprising. But Christian Jones played a major role on the offense. I mean, he was the most experienced offensive lineman by a long shot, not just like, he was a 5th year and there was a 4th year guy behind him. No, like he was the only one, I think. So, that was a huge, he helped out that offensive line so much. And I think having a veteran there, especially after Junior Angelau went down with that injury, Junior Angelau now, I believe is transferring elsewhere. So, that will be something to definitely watch. It'll be interesting to see if Christian Jones were to return to Texas or maybe even enter the transfer portal if he does want to come back. If there's a conversation that maybe Cam Williams is coming along enough to where the coaches maybe encourage Christian Jones to go somewhere else. But regardless, I think he did enough. He helped himself out a lot, regardless of what his decision is from this past 2022 season.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, here is my next one. From Ryan 71780, what young edge do you like most to step up and produce next year? Mine's Justice Finkley. Chip, what's yours?
Yeah, I like Justice Finkley. I mean, he's built, he's put together, he's ready from a physical standpoint. He's ready, and he's the guy who was ahead of Prince Dorba, who basically caused Prince Dorba to go into the transfer portal, because we know Prince Dorba is athletic and has tools. We saw him, with a 3-sack game in the spring game a couple of years ago, but he just didn't have the kind of focus and commitment that that Bo Davis, Pete Kwiatkowski were looking for, and Justice Finkley does. So he doesn't have the length of Barron Sorrell, but he has the physicality, and he's explosive, and he got reps. I mean, he got reps this year. He holds up against the run, and I think that's what the coaches. Before you can be a top-notch edge rusher, you have to be able to stop the run. You can't
Mhm.
just be a guy who rushes the passer, because if you can't stop the run, you're never going to be rushing the passer, because they're just going to be
Right.
running for first downs on first and second down. So I agree with you, Taylor. I think Justice Finkley will be ready to take a big step. He was an early enrollee. He, played behind Ovi Agofu, um, and so it's Justice Finkley's time.
Yeah, and I think Ethan Burke is another one to kind of keep an eye on too. Signee in the 2022 class along with Justice Finkley. I think the two of them, their ceiling is very high, and if it's with Ovia Gofu moving on, you probably, if you're a Texas fan, want to see them start climbing up to that ceiling. And I think that they both have an opportunity to kind of be the one to step up and produce in a big way next year.
Yeah, and they're different. They're very different. Obviously,
Hmm.
Ethan Burke's 6'5". You've got Colton Vasek coming in as an early enrollee as well from Westlake, whose dad, Brian Vasek, played at Texas in the mid-90s. And those guys are long. I mean,
Hmm.
Colton Vasek's like 6'6". And when you look at the guys like JJ Watt, who are 6'6", who have the length, and obviously both Ethan Burke and Colton Vasek have to get in the weight room and build their strength to take advantage of their length. But that length, it can be lethal when it's in an explosive frame, and both Ethan Burke and Colton Vasek have that length that is exciting, because remember all the passes that JJ Watt would bat down?
Hmm.
When you have that kind of length, you're that tall, you can affect so many passes at the line of scrimmage, and that's something that Texas needs more of, quite honestly.
Yeah, yeah, big humans, right?
Big
Regardless of
humans,
if it's
big
on the
athletic
off.
humans.
Yeah, that is a priority of the staff, and I think it's a good thing too, because you're not putting together a 7-on-7 roster when you are playing against, especially once they go to the SEC. I think Steve Sarkisian and his staff recognized that. Tom Herman and his staff did a really good job of recruiting the skill players. The 7-on-7 guys, but when you're playing against the big humans in the SEC, you got to go toe to toe for that. And I think Texas is doing so far in 2 recruiting cycles a good job with that. I'm going to go to the next question from the YouTube channel. We kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, but um, any update on the situation with Catalan from Emmanuel Villafranco? One thing you'll want to keep an eye over at Horns 24/7, because everything that we're hearing so far is that the visit went really well. It could be between Texas and Purdue, but I say keep an eye on it. What do you think, Chip?
Yeah, and Purdue is in it because they have a coach who was at Arkansas,
Hmm.
who has just joined Ryan Walters' staff there. Of course, we know Hudson Card is headed to Purdue to play for Graham Harrell, the new Ryan Walters offensive coordinator. But yeah, you're hearing, and Mike Roach, our recruiting guru at Horns 24/7, wrote about this in the Stampede, as Taylor said. And there's a reason that he's intrigued by Purdue, and that's because he had a coach at Arkansas who he knows really well, who's going there. Um, but Catalan is from the state of Texas, and if he thinks that Texas is closer to being able to break through, possibly play for a title, then let's see what's going on. Texas certainly needs a veteran presence, I think, at the safety position. You've got Jaron Thompson for sure, but Jalen Catalan was, when healthy at Arkansas, he was an all-conference player. and super smart. I mean, super smart, super high football IQ, never out of position. His only thing has been injuries, and
Yeah.
if he's got a chance to make full recovery and and be as explosive as he's been, then oh my gosh, what an addition Jalen Catalan would be.
Yeah, and that's the biggest thing. If he can stay healthy, I think he's one healthy season away from being a, day one, day two type of NFL draft pick. That's the type of talent that he could bring. It would be a huge addition for Texas at a position of need. And kind of going into that, this was the final one here from our Horns 24/7 members. I'm going to kind of like lead into it with that, asking who are some targets for Texas in the transfer portal at wide receiver. Does not having a receivers coach currently hurt Texas' chances at guys? I will say, I think the priority right now is safety in the transfer portal. Texas, they've added a cornerback in Gavin Holmes to from the transfer portal. Now they're shifting their focus to safety, and I would say that is the biggest priority on this roster. Honestly, Chip. I mean, the last 2 years, Texas has had to shift players around from different positions to fill a starting safety role, with Brennan Schooler doing it in 2021. Anthony Cook, he was already in the secondary, obviously. He played corner, he played nickel, then they moved him to safety. That was because of the lack of depth at safety. And so if you can get a proven guy, especially a guy like Jalen Catalan, you hope he holds up from a health standpoint. That's got, but if you can get that type of player, that's got to be priority number one, even more so than receiver. Because the one thing with receiver that I think it's easy to forget, because he was a name everyone was hearing, then it just fell off, was Isaiah Nayer. He's coming back to Texas. He's a guy that we were hearing what really, really, really good things at before he had his season-ending injury that he suffered in after the first week of fall camp. So I would say safety is definitely more of a priority. Obviously, not having a receivers coach in place would probably impact it. But at the end of the day, this is Steve Sarkisian's offense. There's no question about it. If more so, if players want to play in Steve Sarkisian's offense, they're going to play probably regardless of who the position coach is there. But yeah, I would say safety is number one, even more so of a priority than wide receiver. What about you?
Yeah, yeah, and stay tuned over at Horns 24/7 because the Jalen Catalan story appears to be moving pretty quickly. So sounds like Jalen's ready to wrap up this recruiting, and so you'll want to be over at horns247.com for all the latest. Taylor, um,
Real quick, I got one here from our YouTube channel. Predictions for tonight's national championship game. Chip.
yeah, you know what, Max Duggan. I'm not going against him, and D winners. Um, you know, Travius Hodges Tomlinson. I just think this TCU team is a veteran team. Um, and I think Garrett Riley figures out a way to move the football. I don't like the fact that Kendre Miller may not play in this game, which puts it all, um, puts more of the running game on Max Duggan. But man, I think TCU believes. I certainly think they cover, Taylor. How about you?
I mean, I would love to see TCU win it. Honestly, I think that would be great. I know that there's a story in itself if Georgia goes back to back, 'cause they would be the first, I believe, since the inception of the college football playoff to win back to back
Yeah.
national championships. But I would say prior to the semifinal games, if you told me that it was going to be Georgia TCU in the national championship, I would say like, oh man, TCU had a great season and end it there, But the fact that, Ohio State was able to put up, what was it, 41 points on Georgia, their defense has been the stout thing. They haven't faced a offense really like TCU's offense. So I'm going to give, I don't know if this is the logical decision or not, but I'm going to pick TCU too. I think mainly because I just would love to see program of that size, a small private school end up being one that came off a 5-7 season. Nobody thought was going to be in the Big 12 title game, let alone the college football playoff championship game. I think I'm going to, the Cinderella story would be the perfect ending to it. So I'm going to go with TCU.
Yeah, and that 3 high safety look that is unique to the Big 12, thanks to John Haycock at Iowa State, gives quarterbacks it slows them down. They're not
Yeah.
used to it. They don't see it. I mean, Arkansas runs it in the SEC, but TCU's fast, and that's Gary Patterson. He recruited that speed to that roster. He built that roster. Sonny Dykes did a great job adding from the portal, bringing in Garrett Riley and Joe Gillespie as coordinators, and Kaz Kazadi, his strength coach, who was at Baylor when Art Briles was winning Big 12 championships. He is one of the best in the business. So I think people are sleeping on TCU a little bit. I love Stetson Bennett. I love his story, and he may pull it off again, because that dude, man, he believes in himself and he plays with swag, and he's got weapons on offense. So I think it'll be a great game.
Yeah, I'm excited for it too.
All right, everybody. Thanks so much for tuning in to this live mailbag edition of the Flagship podcast. We'll be back later in the week with another episode, Wednesday morning-ish. You know what I mean? So until then, we'll see you over at horns247.com. For Taylor Estes, I'm Chip Brown. Stay safe and keep the faith.